1 in 3 Russian drones flying over Ukraine right now will never reach its target. OT, because of a Patriot missile battery, not because of a billion-dollar radar network, but because of a 56-year-old cargo plane, a volunteer crew, and a drone that costs less than a used car, and that number is climbing every single week. Something has shifted in this war, not on the front lines, not in the headlines. It has shifted in the sky above Ukraine, in the laboratories of Kiev, and inside the burnout wrecks of Russian radar systems, scattered from Crimea to the Finnish border. The story of what is actually happening in early 2026 is not the story most people think they know. It is far more dramatic and far more consequential, because right now Ukraine is doing something that no military in the history of warfare has ever done before, and Russia has no answer for it. To understand why this moment is so different, you have to go back to a plane that was never supposed to fight a war. The Antonov AN-28 first flew in 1969. It was designed to carry passengers and cargo across short distances in the Soviet Union. Slow, twin-propeller, compact fuselage, not exactly the image of a cutting-edge weapons platform. For decades, it sat in hangars across Eastern Europe, ferrying goods, occasionally used for training flights, mostly forgotten. Then a volunteer crew in Ukraine looked at it and saw something completely different. They saw a flying battery. What Ukrainian engineers and volunteers have done to that aircraft is one of the most inventive battlefield modifications of this entire conflict. Under each wing, they bolted 3 hardpoints, 6 launch positions in total. Then they loaded those positions with a drone called the P-1 Sun, built by a Ukrainian company called SkyFall. Alongside it, they began testing American-made Merops interceptors. They fitted the fuselage with an optical targeting system for locating drones in nighttime conditions. They gave the crew VR headsets wired directly into the interceptor's cameras. And they sent this plane into the same skies where Russian Shahed drones hunt Ukrainian cities. But what happened next changed everything. Because here is the problem every ground-based interceptor team has always faced. When a drone threat is detected on radar, a ground team scrambles, repositions, acquires the target visually, and launches. That entire sequence takes time. And time is the one thing you never have when a 300 km/h Shahed is 90 seconds from an electrical substation. The AN-28 solves that problem entirely. When that old turboprop is already airborne, already loitering over a patrol zone, and a Shahed appears on radar, the intercept begins immediately. The crew vectors toward the contact. Visual acquisition happens within seconds. And then the P-1 Sun drops from the wing. Here is what most people don't understand about that moment. A ground-launched interceptor drone burns a significant portion of its battery just climbing to combat altitude and reaching engagement speed. It arrives at the fight, already depleted. The AN-28 launched interceptor is different. It drops from the wing already at altitude, already moving at 300 km/h from the aircraft's own airspeed. Its battery is untouched. Its entire energy reserve is available for the chase. The P-1 Sun accelerates to roughly 450 km/h in pursuit mode. A standard Shahed cruises at around 200. The math is not complicated. The intercept takes seconds, and one crew has done this 213 times. 213 confirmed kills, painted in marks on the fuselage of a plane built before the first moon landing. Done not by a professional Air Force unit. Done by civilian volunteers, including a former world aerobatics champion named Timur, who, after scrambling one too many times to watch missiles turn Shahed drones into expensive fireballs, decided to invest his own money into building a better solution. Ukraine sets a global benchmark for resourcefulness. What other country takes a 6-decade-old utility aircraft, strips it down, loads it with $1,000 interceptors, and sends civilian volunteers out at 2 in the morning to keep the lights on in Kiev? The answer is no other country. Because no other country has been forced to innovate this fast, under this much pressure, with this little margin for failure. However, this is where things take a serious turn. Because the AN-28 is not operating in isolation. It is one piece of a much larger, much more sophisticated strategy that Ukraine has been quietly executing for over a year. A strategy designed not just to defend Ukrainian airspace, but to systematically dismantle the Russian military's ability to see, to target, and to protect itself from above. Think of Russia's air defense network as a wall, a vast, layered, interconnected wall of radars and missile systems stretching thousands of kilometers. At its heart are the big systems, the S-400 Triumph, capable of tracking nearly 100 targets simultaneously, launching missiles that can hit aircraft at 400 kilometers. Behind them are the Nebo-U radars, long-range surveillance behemoths valued at over $100 million each, designed to detect stealth aircraft and ballistic missiles at extreme range. Around them are the shorter-range systems, Buk, Tor, Pantsir, each one covering gaps, providing overlapping zones of protection, creating what Russian military doctrine calls a seamless aerial shield. For 2 years, that shield held. Imperfect, damaged in places, but essentially intact enough to force Ukrainian missiles and drones onto predictable flight, paths that Russian systems could anticipate. Then, Ukraine found the seams. What has happened to Russian air defenses in the first months of 2026 is nothing short of catastrophic. Ukraine has confirmed over 196 strikes on Russian radar systems alone. The Nebo radar family has been hit 58 times. S-400 targeting radars have been destroyed across Tula, Bryansk, Belgorod, Crimea, and Novorossiysk. Buck systems, 56 confirmed hits. Tor systems, 56 more. Pantsir batteries, 27 destroyed. And critically, the SBU's Alpha unit has confirmed neutralizing approximately half of Russia's operational Pantsir stockpile in just over a year. Analysts have a name for what this creates. They call it the Swiss cheese effect. Each destroyed radar or missile battery does not end Russian air defense, but it creates a gap, a blind spot, a hole in the wall, usually 30 to 60 miles wide. And when you punch enough holes into any wall, it stops being a wall. It becomes something you can walk through. A single gap of 50 miles does not sound dramatic. But here's what most people don't realize. A 50-mile gap means that dozens or even hundreds of Ukrainian drones and missiles can penetrate that corridor simultaneously. It means an air defense system that was designed around the assumption of continuous coverage is now being forced to operate like a patchwork quilt, with operators frantically trying to plug one hole while another opens. The pressure has become so severe that Russia has been forced to make choices that would have been unthinkable 1 year ago. Reports confirmed that Russian commanders stripped Kasta 2E2 low-altitude radars from their border with Finland, a NATO member. They pulled strategic assets away from a NATO border to try to fill gaps created by Ukrainian strikes hundreds of kilometers away. A Russian State Duma deputy, Andrei Gurylyov, publicly admitted that Russia's military lacks the forces needed to maintain a continuous shield, and has been reduced to protecting only major cities and critical infrastructure, leaving the rest exposed. Think about what that means operationally. Russia's vaunted integrated air defense network, one of the most sophisticated ever built, has been selectively blind for months, and into those blind spots, Ukraine has been flying. The Vodkinsk ballistic missile factory, oil refineries in Yaroslavl, military electronics facilities outside Moscow. Targets that should have been unreachable just 18 months ago have been struck repeatedly by Ukrainian long-range drones flying through corridors that no longer have eyes watching them. And the numbers behind this campaign are staggering. Ukraine launched over 1,000 long-range drones at Russia in August 2024. By July 2025, that figure had risen to 3,000. In March 2026, it hit 7,000. And in that same month, for the first time since the full-scale invasion began, Ukraine launched more long-range drones at Russia than Russia launched at Ukraine. Read that again. For the first time in 4 years of war, the country defending itself from annihilation was launching more deep strike drones than the country trying to annihilate it. Ukraine's Air Force intercepted 89.9% of incoming Russian weapons in March 2026, up from 80.2% just 3 months earlier. A 9.7 percentage point improvement in a single quarter against a threat that Russia has simultaneously been scaling up. Russia manufactures Shahed drones at 2,000 per month and has announced plans to triple that. Ukraine is defending against more, intercepting more, and launching more, all at the same time. But what happened next changed the narrative that the world has been told about this war, because the argument for inevitable Russian victory was always built on the same foundation. Russia is bigger. Russia has more people. Russia can sustain losses that Ukraine cannot. Attrition favors the side with the larger population. The math was supposed to be merciless. The math has changed. In the first 3 months of 2026, Russia lost 89,000 troops killed or seriously wounded. Not total casualties, not including minor injuries, killed or seriously wounded. That is, nearly 1,500 soldiers every single day. And according to Ukraine's own tracking of Russian recruitment, Moscow is not replacing that rate. Russia aimed to recruit 120 soldiers per day this year. It is actually recruiting around 940 for 4 consecutive months. From December 2025 through March 2026, Russian losses have exceeded Russian recruitment. The Finnish President Alexander Stubb put it bluntly. The kill ratio right now is 1 to 5, 1 Ukrainian soldier for every 5 Russian soldiers. And Russia is capturing territory at a rate that has collapsed from nearly 15 square kilometers per day at the end of 2024 to 5.5 square kilometers per day now. The price Russia is paying for every kilometer of Ukrainian ground has become so enormous that its own generals are beginning to understand what its politicians will not yet admit publicly. This is not a path to victory. This is a path to exhaustion. 96% of Russian casualties in March 2026 were caused by drones. Not artillery, not tanks, not infantry engagements. Drones. Which means every ruble Russia pours into producing tanks and missiles and sending soldiers across open fields is being met by a Ukrainian response that costs a fraction of the price and kills at an extraordinary rate. But Ukraine is not only innovating in the sky. On the ground, a different kind of transformation is underway. The 52nd Separate Artillery Brigade, formed just in August 2025, already operating in the Kramatorsk and Kharkiv sectors. And quietly, in April 2026, it became the first Ukrainian unit to field the M1-28 203mm self-propelled howitzer. This weapon deserves a moment. The M1-28 is not elegant, it is not high-tech, it is a blunt instrument of extraordinary power. A 90-kilogram shell, a range of 30 kilometers with rocket-assisted ammunition, 3 rounds per minute in rapid-fire mode, mounted on a tracked chassis that can reposition after firing, preventing the counter-battery strikes that have destroyed so many Ukrainian guns. 60 of them came from Greece, quietly routed through the Czech Republic in a deal worth nearly 200 million euros. Athens transferred the systems with 150,000 rounds of ammunition, including high explosive shells, rocket-assisted rounds, and cluster munitions. Systems that Greece had placed in storage because they no longer met modern standards, repurposed now for a battlefield that rewards mass and penetrating power over sophistication. What makes this addition genuinely significant is not the M110 alone. It is how it fits into the system the 52nd Brigade has built around it. The Bodana 2S-22 is a domestically built Ukrainian 150mm wheeled self-propelled howitzer. Precise, mobile, designed for long-range strikes against high-value targets, command posts, artillery positions, ammunition depots, drone launch sites. The Bodana reaches out first, surgically, taking away the enemy's ability to direct and sustain a fight. The RM-70 Vampire is a Czech-designed multiple-launch rocket system. When Russian infantry concentrations or mechanized columns are detected, the Vampire delivers saturation fire, dozens of rockets across a wide area in seconds. Not precision, suppression, area denial. The kind of fire that forces enemy soldiers off prepared positions into open ground. And that is exactly where the M110 waits. When Russian forces are displaced from cover, when they attempt to regroup or advance in open terrain, the M110 is already firing. 90-kilogram shells that arrive faster than any soldier can react. Shells that obliterate fortified bunkers and armored vehicles with equal efficiency. And as Russian survivors scatter or take cover in whatever terrain, FPV drones are already overhead, feeding targeting data back to every system in the network. The economic dimension of this is something Russia cannot solve. Western electronic sanctions are preventing Russia from replacing destroyed high-tech radar components. The Nebo-U radar system is valued at over $100 million. Russia cannot manufacture replacements at the rate they are being destroyed. S-400 production runs at a handful of batteries per year. Ukraine is destroying them faster. The accumulation of tactical destructions has become, as one analyst put it, a strategic achievement. And here is what brings it all together. A 56-year-old cargo plane circling in the dark over central Ukraine, loaded with $1,000 interceptors, crewed by civilians with VR headsets. A 60-year-old artillery piece from a Greek storage facility, lobbing 90-kilogram shells 30 kilometers into Russian supply lines. A 58th confirmed strike on a Soviet-era radar system that once watched over half a continent. None of these are the weapons that war watchers expected to define this conflict. None of them appeared in the threat assessments that analysts wrote in 2022. None of them were supposed to be enough. But what most people still don't fully understand is that Ukraine was never trying to match Russia weapon for weapon. Russia has more of almost everything in the traditional sense. More tanks, more missiles, more soldiers, more factories. Trying to win that contest was always going to fail. What Ukraine chose instead was something more dangerous to a large, slow-moving conventional military power. It chose to innovate faster than Russia can adapt, to find asymmetric solutions that force Russia to spend enormous resources solving problems Ukraine creates for almost nothing, to systematically destroy not just Russian equipment, but Russian capability, the ability to see, the ability to coordinate, the ability to sustain a coherent defensive shield across a 1,000-kilometer front. By February 2026, Ukraine began recapturing more land than it was losing in the same period for the first time since the early months of the war. By March 2026, it surpassed Russia in long-range drone launches. By April 2026, it was deploying the most powerful ground artillery it has ever fielded alongside interceptor systems that the United States Army is now studying and purchasing for its own force at a procurement speed, 8 days from concept to contract, that previously would have taken years. The U.S. Army Secretary told Congress directly that interceptor drone innovation had changed American thinking about counter-drone warfare. Ukraine is now exporting interceptor expertise to Jordan to help defend American bases against Iranian drone strikes. The country fighting for its survival is now the world's most powerful military. How to fight the next war. That is not a trajectory that points toward defeat. It is a trajectory that points toward something no one expected when Russian tanks crossed the border in February 2022. And yet here we are, a 56-year-old plane, a $1,000 drone, 213 kills painted on a fuselage. The crew is already airborne again tonight.